the many, many years I've been doing this, there are a lot of questions that I get that are like a lot of the same questions. And a big question is, yeah, record labels. Like, what is that? How does that work? Yeah, publishing, licensing. I've heard about that. What is that? So I thought for today it'd be a really good idea to just use the time to give everyone, whoever's interested, an overview of like what the business is and what publishing is and what licensing is, and kind of give you a sense of how all the pieces kind of work together um, to make these artists that you all know that we talk about week to week when we work together. Um, and just to give you a sense of what it all is and how it all works. It's like a machine in a way. So what I'm going to do is just start with this, I'll call it a presentation, but I'm just going to start with this little deck that I created so I can kind of explain a lot of this stuff to you. And then I'm going to turn my thing off, my presentation off, and I would love for us all to just chat. And if you have any questions, that would be the perfect time to do it. Also, if there's like something on your mind, like if you're curious about how to get started with something, that would be a good time to ask. I can probably point you in the right direction for certain things. But anyway, that's kind of what I thought we would do today. So let me share my screen real quick here. There we go. All right, can you guys all see that? Yeah, all right. So, fancy guys on stage playing to a club, okay? So we're gonna kind of just decode the music industry today. Here we go. So first of all, we have this thing that everyone says, the music business, the industry, the music industry, but what exactly does that mean? And where do all the different words and pieces that you guys hear about fit into all of that? Where do record labels fit in? Where do publishing companies fit in? So within the music business, there's the recording industry. There's different industries that make this big business, right? The recording industry is made up of both independent and major record labels. They're kind of fueled by recording studios, recording music. They do artist development. They promote music and artists. And these labels are big names. A lot of you guys probably have a lot of names that you have heard of. One of the biggest ones in history is Motown. That was obviously kind of an earlier label that blew up a lot of artists that are timeless today still. But there's like Def Jam and there's Warner Music Group and there's just so many. I mean, I could spend a whole time just talking about that, so we're not going to do that. You've heard about that. So then there's also the touring industry. So this is the live, if you guys know about Rocklidditz, okay? Have you guys heard about Rocklidditz? You can like shake or nod. I can see your faces. Okay. So Rocklidditz, for those who don't know it, it's up in Lidditz. It's right here, which is amazing for those who are interested in this aspect of it. Rocklidditz is a hidden gem 15 minutes north of Lancaster, for those who don't know. That is the place where almost every big artist you can think of disappears to for a couple weeks to rehearse for their big tours that they go on worldwide. That place, Rocklidditz, that's the industry that they're in. So they have pyrotechnics and they have huge sound stages, and that's where they go to rehearse. So the touring industry is all about the live performance aspect, taking the music that's created and moving around with it, going to different countries, different cities, different states, and sharing the music with live audiences. So that kind of, there's booking agents who take artists and get them booked at different venues, which are places that they can play, like clubs and bars and stadiums, and however big the artist is, the booking agent usually is the one who books them in those places. There's tour managers who plan the whole thing and go travel around with them and make sure everything goes smoothly, right? So that's the touring industry. And there are some people who are super duper drawn to that. And so if you're one of those people, we should talk about that at the end. But it's a really cool aspect of it. I'm going to talk a little bit less about that today, but just enough to kind of get us started in the conversation. Okay, so then there's also publishing companies. I don't know if I would call it an industry, but it might garner that label. So publishing is basically the industry of writing songs, okay, and getting those songs placed in places that will make money for those songs. So, like, for instance, I once wrote a song, and a friend of mine was um, making a movie, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, this song would be perfect for this movie." That was a very small example because we knew each other. But let's just say you wrote a song and this big, company was making this movie and they needed your song for 30 seconds of your song to play in the really emotional scene where the rain is falling and the feelings are felt and they want to use your song. The publishing company is involved in that. Um, there's independent and major publishing companies. And what they do is they license or basically like sell the rights to the song itself, not necessarily the recording of the song, because that would be the recording industry, but the song, the rights, the ownership of the song itself is handled through the publishing. So every single time your song plays on the radio, Spotify, on YouTube, on a TV show, on a film, in a commercial, the songwriter gets paid through the publishing company, and that's what the publishing company does. So those are the kind of big arms that we're going to chat a little bit more about today. So really quick, this is really important. Let me go back before you get like so many words. The reason I'm going to talk about the history of the recording industry really quick. I'll keep it really brief, but it's really important that you understand this. And the reason is because I feel like there's this sense that people think that in order to be successful as a musician, as an artist, you need to get signed by a major label and put in the recording studio with famous people and go on tour. And the people that you see who have these huge followings, that's how it works. And so that's what you need to do. And that isn't actually how it always works, but for some reason that's still the mentality. And I think that it's still the mentality because the recording industry has really only been around for, like, as it's known now, for like 50 years. So that's a pretty short time in the blip of humanity, right? So let me just explain to you the timeline really quick, and it's all going to make a lot of sense, and then I'll go from there. So in the 60s through the 2000s, that's a 40 freaking year period. For 40 years, record labels ruled the music business. It was all about record labels. 40 years. 100% of new music was created and promoted by record labels. The record labels, they made sure that any artist that they signed got played on radio and got write-ups in magazines, and they would put the money into printing the vinyl, like the records that everyone's getting into collecting now again. They would press the vinyl and sell the vinyl. Then it went from vinyl to 8 tracks. It went from 8 tracks to cassette tapes. I was born in the cassette tape era. And then it went from cassette tapes to CDs. And all of these were physical copies of the music. This is how you owned the music. You had to hold a copy of it in your hand. That was for 40 years. But what happened was this crazy thing called the internet. And around 2000, roughly, I graduated from high school in 2001, right at 9/11, actually, which is a whole other thing, unrelated. But so right around then, when people were starting to go, what is this crazy thing called the internet? There are always people ahead of the game. So what happened at that time was there were these companies that popped up out of nowhere, Napster, LimeWire, and there were others. Those are the biggest names. They started taking music and turning them digital into this thing called an MP3. And you could go online on this crazy thing called the internet and own a copy of a song for free, completely for free. There was no record of it. Nobody got paid for it. You just owned it. You could create your own playlists, and we'd be at parties in college, and we would be making our LimeWire playlists while we were having our party, not thinking about any of this because we didn't care. And it was completely downloaded illegally. They were not supposed to be doing that. Nobody knew it because it was completely unprecedented. It had never happened before. So that's the MP3 came out right at that time. So that became digital music, and you'd own the MP3. So what happened was right around the same time, that's when do-it-yourself artists started emerging, because because that's when Facebook and YouTube and MySpace, which I don't even know if it exists anymore, but that's when they started. So people would go on and make their profiles and say, come listen to my music, and they would make, that was the first time that you could just say, hey guys, I'm a musician, want to hear my music? And some people started doing a lot of that. In fact, that's when Justin Bieber got accidentally discovered. He just like put up a video of himself at 13 or however old he was on YouTube, and Scooter Braun saw this video of him. It was like, that guy, I want to sign him, and the rest is history. That's how Justin Bieber became who he is. It's the beginning of the whole thing. But going forward, after all of that happened, 2010 through 2015, there were all these lawsuits, and Napster there were, people were suing everybody and saying, you can't just give music away for free. This is art. And so they had to figure out something in between. They figured out this thing called streaming. That's where iTunes and Spotify and Pandora started coming in, where you'd pay for the service and you could stream music, but that doesn't give you ownership of the song. It just gives you access to listen to it whenever you want. And iTunes and Spotify and Pandora, they actually pay the artists and the songwriters tiny, tiny, tiny fractions of a penny every single time their song is streamed. So when I say fractions of a penny, that song Happy by Pharrell Williams. On Pandora, it had 43 million streams, and he made about $2,500. So, we're talking tiny percentages of pennies. Okay. It's there's money, but it's not very much. So the streaming thing is still for artists. There's a lot of other ways that artists are figuring things out right now. Streaming is not one of the ways to make money, but it is a good way to get your music out. And then by about 2015, and that's when social media really started kicking in super hardcore, and and the rest is history. We have everything we have now, and it's directly from the artist to the fan. The artist has full control of sharing their music and telling their story and creating it and getting it out to the world. They don't actually need a middleman anymore. You don't need a record label. You just have to put it out. And put it out again, and that's it. So that's kind of where we are now. And we can come back to that if it makes sense towards the end. Okay, so just the thing about a record label is that they are actually really cool, and they do a lot for you, and there is a reason to have a record label. So even though, yes, you can put your music out and people can hear it, what a record label does is it provides money and access to places that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get, okay? So what they do is they will develop you as an artist. If they see that you are a really skilled songwriter and you perform really well, but your style's a little like you don't really care about that, they'll hook you up with like the style developers, and they'll hook you up with the people who are gonna like put your brand together so you look and feel and sound and act and move like an artist. Record label puts money into that. They put money into recording the music that then goes out. They put money into promoting the artist and the music. So they get your music on radio. They get your music into places that just a regular Joe who's super talented can't necessarily get it, because they have those relationships and the money to be able to do that. So record labels are really, really important for some people who are focused in a certain way. But the thing is, and I put this at the bottom in italics, it doesn't quite look like italics, but here's the thing. The record label, okay, actually I'll come back to this. So the artist pays the label back the money that was spent before they get paid. So just hold on to that for a sec. Okay, that's actually how it works. Very interesting. So let's say you're signed to a record label. Okay, you're performing on the street and the president of Warner Music comes up and says, "Kid, you've got it. And I want you to be on our label and sign here." They have you sign a contract. And in that contract, oftentimes the label owns all of the rights to the music that you record with them. Once you sign that paper, they own it. It's theirs. It's not yours. You might own the song if you write the song, because that's the publishing side of things. But the recording that you make is not yours. You have no control over that. And I know my friend Nora over here knows full well the Taylor Swift story and how, and Will also, and how she's going back and re-recording everything because her labels owned those original things. She can't do anything with that now. So you're given an advance. Sign here, kid. You're gonna make it. I'm gonna give you $50,000, and this money is to pay for. It's your job to pay for the recording of your album, and this is gonna cover your living expenses during that time. Your release date is a year from today. Go. And the amount that they offer you is determined roughly by how valuable they see you. If they think they can make a ton of money off of you, you're going to be given a pretty good advance. If they're like just testing the waters, it's going to be a little bit. It's determined by them. So you go off, you record your album, they promote your music on radio and all of the things while you go on tour, you perform your music live. You get access to radio stations and press and promotions and the best photographers and videographers and make music videos. But then you start noticing that money is being made and you're not making anything for a while. And the reason is because the record label is recouping all of the costs they put into you first. Then they start sending you some money. So what happens is there are a lot of artists that get to a certain point and then those costs are recouped and the record label feels like it's too much work, it took too long, and they shelve that artist's next project, and then they kind of put it on the back burner and they don't put much energy into it. And you get these artists who are signed by a record label, but nobody knows who they are because the record label doesn't care anymore because it's too much energy. So that happens. And then after a few years of paying back that advance, then you start making some checks. Then the cycle starts again. Every 2 years, said your contract, make another album. So now here you are 2 years later, you've toured, you have to make new music to go back again. So that's the circle for the record labels and the artists. And for some people, it works really, really well. And for others, it doesn't. And it's, either way. So that's that. So let's shift now into publishing. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, and then I promise you there'll be space for us to all process. So a publishing company is a different thing. So the publishing company sells songs to the music supervisors and also record labels that can be used in projects. So a publishing company might go out and pitch your song to Rihanna, for instance. Let's say you write a song and you're like, oh my gosh, I could totally hear Rihanna singing this song. The publishing company pitches the song to Rihanna's record label, and Rihanna records the song that you wrote. She's the artist, you're the songwriter. And every single time her song, your song, is played on the radio or played in TV or movie or whatever it is, you make money because you wrote that thing. And that's pretty cool. So the publishing company's on your side. They're trying to make money off of you as well. The publishing company collects all the money that the song makes from sync licensing, which is like when you make an Instagram reel, all of the music that is available for you to use in your reels, those are sync licenses. They're giving you permission to use their song in that space on that platform. It's a license is like a borrowing. It's like permission, right? And the publishing company keeps track of the licensing and the sync licensing, and they pay the songwriter 50% of everything that's made, okay? The publishing company keeps the other 50%. Also, keep in mind that if you ever look at the list of people written, like you look at a song, sometimes there's like 10 people, there's like 10 songwriters on a song. So 50% of that music, of that money goes to 10 people, split among 10 people, is basically what that means. So licensing can be used for TV, film, commercials, social media reels, YouTube, I mean, you name it. People need music. They need instrumental music. They need music with energy. They need music with emotion. They need tense music. They need music for their projects. So there's actually a lot of money in this if you do it right. Some songwriters will own their own publishing company, and then they get to keep 100% of all of the profits because they, the publishing company, pays themselves the other half. So it's a beautiful thing, but then they have to do the work to get their music placed in places, right? So it's a lot of energy. All right, so let's look at Taylor Swift really quick. So just to put into perspective what this means for an artist, the picture of how the flow works is Taylor Swift will, number one, she'll write some songs. Those songs, she'll write those with her record label involved. So this is the same flow. It's like record label, publishing, touring, right? She'll write these songs, usually more songs that end up on the album, and she'll record those songs, and the record label will decide if they're ready or not. And actually Taylor Swift now I'm thinking might not be the best example because she has a lot more control. But just imagine like when she was 15 and she was recording her first album, this is what it looked like. So she writes these songs. She then moves on to the publishing company. She puts all of her songs through her publishing company, so they now have a record of it, right? Then she records her album with the recording label in mind. They help her, they get her all the musicians. She records her album, she names it and gets it ready. They start promoting it. And through the promotion of the album, people get really excited because they get to now see her perform this new album live. So she actually makes more money touring and performing than she does on the actual recordings of the music because the record label tends to own most of that. But she actually gets paid to perform these songs. So then she goes out, she performs these songs, she has a big show, she has huge stadium tours, and she makes money, percentages of every single person who buys a ticket in that stadium, she makes. And that's really cool. And then what happens is eventually that she runs out of steam, she's tired, the tour is over, and she takes a break and goes to Cabo for a while and relaxes, and then she starts writing some new songs. And then the cycle continues. And that's the flow of what it means to be a recording artist. And usually that's how it works. There's sometimes a little bit different, but that is what you could picture for yourself if you have a traditional flow as a recording artist, okay? All right, so what does this mean for you? Everybody here has an interest in this. Hold on one quick sec. Let me just make sure that there's, I thought I saw somebody here. No, okay. So you are a singer. You are maybe a songwriter. You take voice lessons. You can read some vocal music. You may or may not play another instrument. You're a songwriter. You love to write. You're a poet. You can maybe play at least some beginner piano or some guitar that you can put with your words. You maybe have a home studio to record some ideas. Maybe you're an instrumental musician. Maybe you just play guitar and you love the guitar, but you don't really trust your voice. So you play and you focus on that one instrument. You're really, really good at it. You may or may not use your voice. You should probably be able to read some music for that instrument. That's the goal. So you can speak the language of music. Or maybe you are a beat maker, and beat makers are really cool because they actually make all the beats to these songs that we hear that are like steeped in different types of traditions that don't need traditional music. So a beat maker uses electronic sounds and equipment in order to create the music that we hear. they don't necessarily always play instruments, traditional instruments. They often can play a keyboard pretty well. They use production software as their instrument. They have a home studio to record ideas. So probably at this point, everyone's kind of thought of themselves as like, okay, I'm sort of like that person. I'm sort of like that person. Um, but there's also overlap to all of this. All of these things overlap. You do not have to put yourself into a box. You just have to see that there are these boxes, and within each box, there's, expectations, and there's things that can happen and things that you should do and know. You notice really quick that I've put read music in there a few times. So, and I'm also I'm actually put that in there on purpose because a lot of us are super talented, but reading music is really hard. And, it's tricky. And so there's levels to it that we have to work for if we want to take ourselves to that next level. And reading music and being able to relay the language to other musicians is part of that, sort of, unfortunately, for those of us who are so auditory like I am. Um, so all of you guys are probably some sort of combination of any of these things. There's probably other categories. I'm just sort of putting these here. There's also people who just love music. They don't even see themselves in any of these categories. They just love music. They have a really good ear. They like have the ability to like hear a song and be like, that's going to be a hit. And then a year later, they're like, see, I told you guys, we heard it on Instagram and that song is going to be a hit. I knew it was going to be a hit. So there's people who have good ears, but they're not trained. And then there's also people who just love like the touring industry and the live music thing and the vibe of a crowd. And they're not trained in any particular instrument either, but there's still a place for everybody within this business, which I think is really cool. So these are sort of some of the things that, I mean, not everybody here cares all that much for like a what I want to be when I grow up sort of vibe. But I just want to tell you that as a professional musician, and there's other categories too, within the industry, these are some of the categories that I thought of. Producers are combinations of beat makers and instrumentalists, okay, and sometimes vocalists. Studio engineers are people who probably have some sense of instruments, but really they're into the science of recording. So they probably are really into like the equipment and like the technology and the science of it. Composers for musicals are usually people who write songs, who have a really good sense of how to use the instrument that they know to create feeling with or without words. Well, for musicals, probably you need a lot of words for that. Live sound engineers are people who have a really good sense of music, love the live sound environment, love being in the crowd, love watching performers live. They don't necessarily see themselves on that stage, but they love the energy and the dynamism. Dynamics isn't really the word. Dynamism. The dynamics of that environment. I'm not actually sure what the right word is there. And they're into the science of it. They're into that. It's really, I find it super fascinating. Live sound engineers are awesome. They have really, really good ears. Then there's a touring musician. This can be a backup vocalist for Beyonce. They don't have to be front and center, but they can go on tour and still make a living as a musician. There's the guitarist for, whoever. There's Chris Stapleton's bass player. There's his drummer. There are session players. There's the guy who goes on tour with Chris Stapleton, and then there's the guy who played the bass on the album. So he's the guy who plays, or the girl who plays in the studio session on the record, right? There's the music supervisor who takes this music and puts it into film and TV and commercials and all of those things. There's composers for film and TV, similar to composers for musical, but sort of a slightly different take on it. Then there's the recording artists like Taylor Swift and Justin Bieber. And I mean, I'm using really poppy examples, but you have your own categories of people that you think of. Then there's the songwriters. They don't perform. They don't share their music like with their own voice on it. They write songs and they're good at that. And then they sell their songs to other people to perform. And they make a ton of money. Songwriters can make a lot of money. It's really, really interesting. So that is that's the music industry in a giant uh confusing presentation. And I'm going to stop sharing now. And I'm going to give you all a moment to process all of the stuff that I just said. um and I wonder if before we start asking any questions, think about any thoughts or questions that you have. But I would very briefly love to hear from whoever's comfortable with sharing. Um, like to say your name and like kind of what aspect of all of this most interests you. So, does anyone want to just volunteer and be like, yeah, I'd love to talk about myself for a quick sec? If not, I'll just sort of call people out who I can actually see. I assume if your camera's not on, hey, Eli, then maybe you don't want to share. And, it's not school, so I don't care all that much, but it's good to be involved if you can. Yeah, Juliet, thanks for volunteering. Go ahead.
So, we're just saying like what we see ourselves as, right? In this? Yeah.
Can you say that one more time? I lost like the first part of your sentence.
We're just seeing like what we see ourselves as, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that I'm like a songwriter and singer and like recording artist, I guess. I don't
Cool.
know. Like, I write songs and record them. So
Yep.
whatever that was. Yeah. And I mean eventually I really like the idea of like touring and performing and stuff. So I think that I'll try to do that at some point.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I love it. Yeah, go ahead, Will.
Hi, I'm Oliver, and I see myself more, or like in the future, more as a recording and touring artist because I do really like writing songs, but I also like attention. So,
Nice. I love it. You gotta like attention to like want to go on tour for sure. Anyone else? No. Carter, what about you? Oh, well, sorry. Liana, we'll go to you next because I just totally called on him.
Uh, I honestly have no idea. Like,
Sure.
I feel like right now I'm just kind of into like learning how to sing and
Yeah.
songwrite, but uh, I guess right now I'm just doing it for fun. I really don't have any like plans on what to do with it. Just doing it as a hobby, I guess.
Yep. Love it. Sounds good. Liana, how about you?
Um, as of right now, I think I see myself as a singer. I haven't done a lot of like songwriting, but I have been getting into it more recently, since I like started this class.
Mhm.
But I also don't really know where I want to take it. I feel like it's a lot of pressure, and like thinking about it and like making money off of it is something I never really thought about.
Right.
So yeah, but if I were to say what I see myself as, I would say like a touring recording artist.
Cool. Yeah, go ahead, Nora.
My inspirations are Taylor Swift, and like Lana Del Rey and people like that. And I songwrite like crazy. Like I like to write a lot, but I also really like to sing. And I don't think I would really like the idea of like selling my songs because they're kind of mine.
Right.
And so I would sort of be the singer-songwriter type.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, the cool thing is like, this is our focus on music business, but the truth is that there's room for everybody in it depending on interest. And also, one person who sees themselves in this way, 4 years down the line, you might see yourself this way. You might see yourself that way. You might see yourself that way. So it's a fluid, your identity within all of this is meant to change. So you might see yourself one way right now, and then in a couple of years, you might get inspired by something that you didn't know existed. And then all of a sudden, the whole concept for what you're thinking for all of this could change. So it could be a hobby, and then one day you're like, oh my gosh, I love how this feels, and I can't stop doing it. I just want to do it forever. And then all of a sudden, it's no longer a hobby, right? So it's really good to follow the things that feel good because then you're always moving in the right direction, regardless of where it ends up taking you. Sometimes it ends up taking you to a place you were not expecting, but it takes you to exactly where you were always meant to be. And a lot of this is very like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I, caution against us all thinking like, okay, well, this means that now I have to take myself in that direction. And I don't want you to think that. It's just sort of like an overview because I do get a lot of these questions like, well, what is all of this? So with that said, does anybody have, and you're welcome for those who don't want to have their cameras on, that's totally fine. Anybody, you can put it in the chat or you can pop in and ask a question. But if you have any questions about all of this, I mean, this is a lot of information. Oh, looks like we lost Eli and he's back. This was like so much information. So does anyone have any specific questions that they would like to throw out now? And I'll see if I can answer, and we can even just, maybe someone else in the room knows the answer to that. Yeah. Hey, Eli, welcome back. Hey, did you drop out accidentally? Did you like lose?
Yeah. So what happened was I was running like on the website and it was being really weird, so I joined on the app.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you're back. I thought you turned off your camera because you didn't want to share, but unfortunately, since your camera's on, I'm going to make you share. So, could you just really briefly tell everyone like your name and sort of generally what aspects of all of this interest you?
So I'm Eli. The most interested part, I guess, is I'm like really interested in the production side of the music industry.
Cool. Thank you. Awesome. So yeah, so with that said, does anyone have any questions? Does anyone want to know anything deeper? Is anyone, kind of curious about like the Instagram rights, for instance? Like just yeah, go ahead, Nora. Is that your hand up or is that just
Yeah.
like a cool little pose? Okay.
It's not a pose. That would be weird.
Just checking.
So all of this kind of feels like expensive to do what like a lot of people want to do. So like how would you do this if you're broke?
That is such a good question. That's such a good question. So one of the things we didn't talk about in this is like how people are really doing it now. What I really focused on was like mostly the questions that I get are like the music industry, what's the industry? What's a record label? How does it work? So that's what this was meant to cover. But the reality is because of the fact that you don't actually need those industries to get started, what you do is you just stay true to who you are and what you create, and you start using the platforms that you have available for free and just start sharing what you do. And you consistently share it. So it's not just like putting up a video of a snippet of your song and then like 6 months go by. It's deciding that you want people to know your music, and you start just having fun with being yourself as a musician or whatever aspect of all of this you see yourself as, and start sharing that. So as artists, there's the rehearsing and the practicing, but the truth is that the true artistry really clicks in after you've also shared it. So there's painters who paint for their whole lives and they pass away and people walk in their house and there's like these incredible paintings and they had no idea because they never did an art show. So being an artist, part of it is sharing. So now we have all these platforms available to us where you can just share without asking anyone's permission, except for maybe your parents. So because, it's probably appropriate to do that.
But if you want to get away from like the acoustic side, like if you want to be more produced than say just a person and their piano and their voice, like if you want to get away from that, like it would be cool to stay that way, but like if your aspirations are to get away from just the acoustic and to really have it produced and big and like number one? Like,
Mhm.
how do you do that with starting so little?
Another really good question and a good aspect of the question that you first asked. So, two things. One, the reality is that if you want to, if you want it to, if you have these huge sites for it that include a lot of people, um, the fair thing to do would be to pay those people. So there is money involved in that, and that is the reality. How much money sort of determined by who you know and the people that can do things for you and with you as a team. But the other aspect of this is that the truth is that the good songs, like you can produce a song and make it sound super fancy with all kinds of production behind it. But if the foundation of the song sucks, then the production sucks. You know what I mean? Like the production just, have you ever heard that, like slapping lipstick on a pig? Like it's not, it's just a pig with lipstick. You know what I mean? And strangely enough, in pop music, there's some weird lipsticked pigs. I mean, there are some songs that you're like, that's a hit. Like I don't even, but I'm not going to go there because it's just that's where the money flows. The record label decided to put money in that and they made it famous. I don't know, but the really good songs that last forever, the Elton Johns, the Billy Joels, the Whitney Houstons, the Mariah Careys, the Smokey Robinsons, Lady Gaga, Sia, like all of these people who have a longevity of career, who really have made an impact, their foundation is solid. So they can sing their song produced or they can sing their song acoustic. And either way, the song is perfection. So what you do is you start sharing with what you have available to you. And then what ends up happening is you build a network of people and you start being able to take your things to the next level. So not that this is necessarily going to happen, but let's just say 2 years from now, right? We've got our friend Eli here. He's into music production. We've got a few people here who write songs. 2 years from now, one of you who's writing a song is going to be like, Eli, I've got this really cool song. Like, we should try to produce it together. And now neither one of you has any money, but now you just took this acoustic song and you just turned it into a banger. And all you had to do was like hang out and make a cool song. Right. So that's what I mean about networking. That's one of the reasons why doing this kind of thing is so important to me. I want you all to see yourself as a network of people roughly the same age, roughly interested in sort of the same thing, getting your footing, thinking about where you sit in all of it, and then connecting with each other, because the truth is that that is where the magic really happens. So that's sort of a long answer to a short question, but I hope that helps. Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Liana.
Wait, hold on. Oh, yeah, I remember. So I was just wondering, like, speaking of like networking and like a network of people and like meeting people who can help you, like in Lancaster, what places like would you recommend to go to like meet people, if that makes sense?
Great question. So first of all, you've already started because you started going to that one spot. There's some really great people there. It is a little bit more poet heavy, but there's, as you saw in our singer, performer, instrumentalist, that whole thing, there's overlap. So you go to the places where music's happening. There's open mics almost every night in this city. So that's the one that's hosted by a friend of mine, which is the one I suggested that you go to. But then there's others that are music heavy. So oftentimes you show, like Tellus 360 sometimes has these, and they're like at times when it doesn't have to be 21 plus. Like some of these places are clubs, and so it's like you just can't go, and it's kind of annoying, um but there are places that it starts earlier, so it's 18 plus or whatever until a certain time, but up until that time you can show up and rock your song, and you can show up and sing a cappella, and there's a guitarist over there going, oh my gosh, you're so awesome, that's just like a song I just wrote, we should totally connect. So literally just showing up and feeling the energy of people, and then kind of taking the step of being like, hi, So I'm a singer and I've been working on, I thought you sounded amazing and I'd love to connect. And like, that's like sort of the hardest part is like introducing yourself, I think sometimes. But that's kind of how networking is. Like those events are meant for people to connect. Everybody's there because they want to meet new people and collaborate. That's the purpose of them. In fact, a friend of mine recently posted a list of open mics. Did I send that to you already? I must not have. I'm going to see if I can find that and I'll send it to you. Does anybody else want me to send them that list? Like interested in the open mic thing? Okay, I'm going to see if I can find that and then I will email it to you. I know there's one Monday, there's one Tuesday, the one you've been going to is Wednesday. Telus sometimes does it on Sundays, it's like afternoons or something. I'm not totally sure. The other thing, you might walk into an open mic and it's all a style of music that you're just completely uninterested in. And you walk in and you're like, well, this was interesting. Bye. And you go. So, you know, you never know. But I will definitely send you that. Hi, Jennifer. Good to see you. Does anybody else have any other questions about their particular aspect of this and like ways to get started or thoughts that they have? Yeah, go ahead, Eli.
So this is kind of like a weird question. But like for music that's sort of like weird or like out there, like I'm not sure if you know like Death Grips or like Björk or something like that. Do you
Okay.
know if people like that create that sort of music like find any success in the industry?
So that kind of music, they would consider it kind of niche. So it appeals to a smaller group of people. So a lot of things I was talking about is kind of this like pop music machine, right? But there's so many genres and subgenres of genres and on and on. And what happens is in the niche market, there's big niche markets that can also cross over into other markets. And what's cool about the niche market thing is that the people who are fans love this music. Like they will follow you anywhere. And that's what's really cool. You can build naturally a really dedicated following because people who love the music you love, especially if it's not the mainstream, they don't find it everywhere. So when they find it, they are hooked and they're in it with you. So yes, people have like, okay, so when I was growing up, I grew up in the like when I was really into music, it was like late 90s and into like the early 2000s, like R&B and neo soul, which was like a jazz and soul fusion thing, and hip hop. So I was really into Lauryn Hill and like Jill Scott and some of these artists who were like based in Philly and these different places. They got a lot of notoriety and I love their music. And one of the subgenres of all of that was underground hip hop. And these were guys who would travel around the Midwest and were some of the most fantastic, crazy MCs you will ever hear, but they weren't mainstream. But they make a killing. There's a guy named Brother Ali. He's Muslim. He's albino, and he's Muslim. And he is one of the craziest MCs you'll ever hear. Atmosphere is amazing. And so I used to listen. So this was during those Napster days. Someone downloaded a song. I heard it and I was hooked. And to this day, I can recite their albums. And when I mention them, people are like, "Who?" But in terms of talent and scope of career, they're still going. I mean, we're talking however many years later. So these niche markets like are lasting markets. It's pretty cool. But the important thing is that you stay true to what you hear. You know, if you start, then they start talking about the selling out thing. You know, like if you want to be fringe, if you want to be different, then be different, and it will attract exactly the people that are going to be fans. 100%. So anything else? Any other questions? Jennifer, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I did hear that you're sort of interested in like the live music thing. Is there anything that you want to tell me about that? Like, do you have any questions about that and how to get into that here? I'll just see if I can answer anything you have. You're like, once I unmute, maybe. Is it not working? Okay, that's okay. Feel free if you want to drop a question in the chat or if you want to email me or reach out at another time, totally fine. It's such a cool industry. I'm just going to really quick, briefly touch on that because we didn't talk as much about it. But the truth is that Rock Lidditz is a killer place for you to get connected to. They do programs for high schoolers who are interested in the science and the practice of like live sound, and you learn it as a skill, like you'd learn tech. It's a technical skill in the music industry, which is so cool. It's a scientific technical skill. So you learn how to listen, but then you also learn all of the gear and all of the boards and how to connect everything and what the sound waves mean and how to make the bass pop more and stuff like that. It's a really cool field, and they're trying to get more people into it. So yes, as I find more information about Rock Lidditz and the high school program there, are you graduating this year, Jennifer? No, you still have a little time. Okay. But I think it's like a junior senior thing, and then I know that for sure they have a college program also. So I'll let you know when I find more about that. Well, I'm done with my own spiel, but does anyone else have any other questions before we finish up? Yeah, go ahead, Juliet.
So I have a question about like, is there okay, so obviously you hear about like moving to like New York or LA or like Nashville.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is there like something, is it like really like make a difference to move to one of those places?
That's a really good question. Does it make a difference? It can make a difference, but I don't think it makes a difference in the way that one thinks it does. It's not like if you're not there, you can't make it, but it makes a difference because of the networking and the access. So we're talking about Lancaster, and Liana and I are talking about these open mics. You go to Nashville, I mean, you have 20 open mics to choose 7 days a week, depending on what you're interested in. So it gives you a little bit more access. There's more people doing it. The other part of it, and also it depends. So like Nashville's a really great city for people who are interested in songs and songwriting. LA is a great city for people who are interested in songs and songwriting too, but that's like a performer zone. Like bands meet and it's about the live performances
Yeah.
they put on. Um, New York is really good for the club scene. So the smaller clubs, the smaller venues with like you can sell out these small venues, and it's a little bit more intimate, and it's not so much about the show, but it's about like the music, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So Nashville's like the song and the story. LA is like the show, and then New York is kind of like the music. But then there's also like Philly, which is great for anyone who's into like neo soul and soul music. Philly is a really good city for that. There's gosh, Prince was from Minnesota. I mean, you can really do it from anywhere. But you do get a little bit more access in these other places. So, you don't have to. Um, but it's pretty fun to have the opportunity to explore. You guys met Kiana a few months ago. I mean, I'm gonna try to get her to come back, but she's still in LA. She's rocking it, and she had just moved there. So yeah, there's a lot. Um, yeah, go ahead, Nora.
Do you have to be like a country artist to perform in Nashville and like get noticed in Nashville?
Nope, you don't. So, Nashville, that's the like basis of their scene is this honky tonk kind of country thing. But lately, in the last 6, 7, 8 years, maybe, it's filling up with people who are really into the industry of songwriting. So I'm gonna stick a few things. So like there's let me see if I can find this one. They're based in Nashville. Instagram. Let me just pull up my Instagram account real quick because there is a group called the Song House. Have you guys heard of the Song House? It's a really diverse group of people who come together and write on a theme. I just put it in the chat. They write on a theme every week. 30 minutes to write a hook. I don't know if you've seen these videos on Instagram. 30 minutes to write a hook. Some of their songs have blown up on Instagram to the point where they've recorded them professionally and now they're on Spotify and the other places. But they're so cool to watch because in 30 minutes they write this hook that I swear would be on the radio. And there's a ton of people in the room. And they like take turns sharing their hook from that songwriting session that they did. And they're in Nashville. It's a very diverse group of people. And then so that's an example of like, no, it doesn't have to be country, but that is sort of the basis of it. But I think that the reason is because country is steep, like songwriting is a big part of the country tradition, the storytelling of it, the pictures that you paint. Pop music tends to be a little simpler. You don't have to say very much. So, when you can marry the two, great. But then there's like, you don't have to do any, like a lot of this, I'm talking from a pop perspective, but there's so many subgenres within this that, you can put your stamp on it just by pulling in all the pieces of who you are and then creating something new with all the little pieces of yourself. And those are the people who usually get the furthest because they're true to their own sound. Cool. Well, this was really great. Give me a thumbs up if you feel like you learned something and this was valuable for you. I hope so. Okay, good. I actually really love this and I would like to do more of these. So I would like to do it kind of like a series, like almost like an artist development series where we come together and we talk about how to get your music on Spotify, these kind of different things. A couple of you kind of already know how to do that. Will, you already have music on Spotify. But did you know how to get your music available on Instagram from the Spotify thing, right? So like imagine I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I want to make a reel. And I go, I wonder if Will's music is up there. And I type in Willoughby and I'm like, oh, I can use your music now as the backdrop to my reel. And that's how you get your music viral on there, right? Well, not everything gets viral, but that's how people start sharing that kind of stuff. So that's one of the topics I wanted to talk about and other things too. What I would love and request everyone to do sort of before you go even, I would like to get your feedback. And you don't have to, you can log off if you want, but I'm just going to send you this link really quick. It's just a Google form. If you go on there and you give me some thoughts, I think at the end, it's like anything else you want to share. If there's anything else that's really interesting to you that you would like to do in this format and get more information about, put it in that bottom box there. And I'm just going to kind of keep doing these and invite you guys, and you should just come and meet me here and we'll keep talking. Anything else before we go? You need anything? No? Thank you guys so much for coming. This was really awesome. Thanks, guys. You're awesome. You know where to find me if you need anything.
Thank you, Julia. Bye-bye.
See you guys later. See you in a few weeks. Bye.
Thank you.